YouTube. All right. Ooh, got some frizzies going on. Hey, everyone. We've already got people here. Awesome. People are everywhere. Hello. We will dive right in here. I do want to see if I can share this to Facebook. Oh, it just shares that. It doesn't actually go live. Okay, never mind. Okay, so hi, hello, welcome. I am Leah McDermott. I am the founder of Your Natural Learner and Bridge Academy, and we are here for our weekly live call where I teach you about something related to homeschooling, unschooling, learning, education. And then I take questions that have come in from my Bridge Academy family. So if you are in Bridge Academy, hi, hello. Your questions that came in through the form, I will get to those at the end of the call. And we'll make sure to put a timestamp in the listing or in the YouTube caption for where you can jump right to those, like always. So you don't have to watch all of this if you don't want to, but hopefully you do, because today's a good topic. And then if you're not in Bridge Academy and you want to be able to ask me a question on these weekly calls, you definitely should join because it's amazing. Anyway, hello, bridgeacademy.us, you can learn more, or on any social platform, you can comment Bridge and we'll reach out to you with something. Okay. So today's topic is inspired by a couple of different things. We're going to go way back to the basics. And I've found that as I continue my teaching journey and continue working with families and, talk about things a lot, what happens is I tend to move beyond the basics, right? I've been talking about a lot of these things for a very long time, almost 20 years now. So I forget sometimes to go back to the super basics. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about unschooling how to. That's the topic for today. We're going to go way, way back to the beginning. But there's a reason that we're doing that. And, homeschooling right now is surging. Homeschooling rates are surging. People are pulling their kids out of school in rates unlike anything we've seen probably ever, to be honest. I haven't done the research on that, but they, between things that are going on at the Department of Education, budgeting, just, the rose-colored glasses of the education system are coming off. I think they maybe have been like slipping and falling for a really long time. But as time progresses, as AI progresses, as the job market changes, as technology changes, as the world changes, people are seeing things differently, and we are seeing more than ever more people choosing to pull their children out of the education system, which I think is amazing. But what happens then is that a lot of times parents are doing this without support. They're doing it without an idea of maybe even why. Daily inside Bridge Academy, I see families that are joining when they never thought they were going to homeschool before, like that was not on their radar at all. And then because of bullying situations, or their child is having anxiety around school, they have a neurodiversity that's not being supported, a situation has just thrown them into this decision when they had not had time to think about it, plan for it, get support, do research. And I'm seeing that more and more. And I think, I wrote an email 2 days ago that I sent out to my list, and I published it on social media. So if you had a chance to read that, it was kind of long. I'll summarize it for you. We'll probably put links down below to it, but essentially, it was an apology letter of sorts where I wanted to take ownership of the fact that I may have been saying for a long time, anyone can unschool. It's great, right? If you know me at all, I'm an unschooling advocate. And we're going to talk about that. But what happens is if we just say that, yes, it's true. It is true that anyone can unschooling. And it is true that it is, I will always believe that a true unschooling experience is the best possible learning experience for a child, eventually, right? That's ideal. However, if we're not all starting at the same point. So I had a discussion this morning with a mom whose child is 3 or 4 years old, not in school yet, obviously, but she's already making plans to unschool. She's asking questions about Bridge Academy. She's asking for resources. She's probably watching this video right now, like already making those plans. So for that mom who is already before her child is school aged on that trajectory of thinking, already doing the work to like remove that systemic stuff from her mind and will start her child in that experience. Her starting point and her child's starting point is going to be drastically different from the parent whose child is in 8th grade and they are having this like all of a sudden they have to do this. And yeah, it sounds great. Of course, an unschooling experience sounds fantastic. But if you have never thought about it and you have all of these years of conditioning, both for yourself and your child, that's really hard to just jump right into. And so the starting lines for those families are going to be like a world apart. So that's why we're talking about this today, because, and honestly, even for any family in between that, there's going to be moments where something just doesn't feel right. And yeah, we would love to get to that point of a beautiful unschooling experience, right? Where your child has all of these passions and they follow them and you're their guide and every day feels amazing and different and flexible and free, right? Like that's the ultimate desire. But there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't feel that way. So let's dive right in. The first thing we're going to talk about is, why is this so hard? Like, we have this ideal thing. Why is that so difficult to just embrace and step into? And then we're going to talk about how we can do that. So the email that I wrote was kind of like an opener to this conversation. So if you did read that, if you're on my list, and that kind of brought up some feelings for you, great. Let's talk about it. So why is this so hard? Why is it so hard to say, oh my gosh, I've seen unschooling. I've seen Leia's Instagram. I resonate with everything you say. Like, this looks and sounds fantastic. But then in the day to day, why am I still having all of these fears? Like, I'm constantly worried about whether my child's going to fall behind, if they're going to hate me, if I'm making a mistake, what my family thinks, what the neighbors think. I'm having like all of these internal feelings, and my child is already like a week after saying they want to go back to school, or they're not, like, they're bored. They don't know what to do with their time. They're resistant to anything that I try. They don't know what they want to learn. Why is all of this happening? Why is this part so hard? It should feel good to be free. And an example I used in my email was like, very dystopian in a way, but like sci-fi literature, but I think it's really resonant, which is, it's an analogy for this is like, you're in the factory, right? You're like on the assembly line and every day is the same and you know exactly what to expect and you're doing the same thing constantly. And then like there's some sort of awareness of this, right? And I hate to use the Matrix as an example because it's so cliche, but like there's an awareness that every day is the same and you're just in this factory. And so you just like stop and you just step off, you push the emergency button, whatever, and you just step off the assembly line. And whether you view yourself as the person that's working in the factory or like the thing that's on the assembly line, says a lot about, who you are as a person and what you're like viewing your life as. I tend to think of that as like myself or the parents as the ones in the assembly, especially former teachers are going to feel this way. And the children are the ones on the line, right? But whatever, however you feel, you push that button and you just are like, no. And you walk outside, you just push open the exit door and you step into the sunlight and you're like, yes. And it's like the end of a sci-fi novel, right? It's very akin to a book I'm reading right now too by Haruki Murakami, The City and Its Uncertain Walls. Something to add to your TBR if you need a new book. But it's like you step out and you're like, oh, yes. And you're in the sunlight and then the movie ends, right? It fades out and you're free. But a week later, you don't know what to do because freedom is scary. Freedom is terrifying. And the trauma that we've experienced by being a part of that assembly line, whether we are on it or working it, and really we were both, right? We were on it as children. Now we're working it. That's literally the factory model of public education. That part is scary. There's a lot of conditioning that's happened to us, especially like as adults, we are a little bit ahead of the game in that we can recognize that it is conditioning, and we can recognize those thoughts that we're having and why we're having those fears, and we can do that work. But we also are functioning with fully developed brains. We've seen the other side of school, like, oh, I was promised all these things would happen, and now like it's impossible to get a job without like a master's degree. But also student debt is crazy, and also, was college even worth it for me in the career that I chose? And like now AI is taking over my jobs. We've seen the other side. We see all of these realities. For our children whose brains are still developing, bodies are still developing, emotions are still developing, they don't have the luxury of seeing the other side of that. They're still in the conditioning period. So that's even harder for our kids. So that's part of it, is conditioning. Social pressure, obviously. Yes. And I think that that's starting to change. Even in the last couple of years, like my oldest just said to me the other day, he was like, I know so many kids who homeschool now. Like we've never sought out specific homeschool groups. My kids have been fine making friends just, in their neighborhoods with their social activities. But it used to be that my kids were the only ones that were homeschooled. And now he was saying like, so many kids are doing this now, whether it is like cyber school, online school, more traditional homeschooling in some capacity. Like every single year, we know more and more families that are choosing an alternative in some way. However, it's still not the norm, and the social pressure is still there. And I see like the generational pressures, right? Of like your extended family doesn't support you or doesn't understand what's going on. And that's where a lot of that fear for parents comes up of like, am I doing the right thing? Is it right for me to say, I'm going to be countercultural here? I'm going to do things that everyone else isn't doing. And the more rural you live, the more that pressure builds, because it is less likely that you'll find that community in real life. So I understand that as well. And then again, like I said, that factory mindset, right, of that freedom is terrifying. It feels great to be free at first, like when you're not waking up to an alarm clock every morning, and you're not rushing to pack a crappy lunch, and you're not rushing to put the kids on the bus, and you're not fighting about homework. When all of that is gone at first, it feels really great. And it feels really great to a kid who gets to sleep in and eat when they're hungry and go to the bathroom when they have to and do the things they want to do. But after the honeymoon period of that is over, they're going to default to feeling like I knew what I was doing every day, and now I don't, and that's uncomfortable. And that's hard. And so having these conversations with families is part of the catalyst here. And the other one was a very personal experience that I'm not going to share names, but a child that I work with was going through this, a high school kid who was very dejected, did not enjoy school, was having issues all around, left, to join Bridge Academy and Unschool. And after a few weeks was like, I don't know, this isn't working. I think I want to go back to school. And so I had a conversation with, the parents and this child, and was just honest, like, what is it that you miss? Why do you want to go back to school? And, with no judgment, if that's what you want to do, fine, great. Everybody has a different path that they're on, but I knew what was going on. Right. And so we got down to it. And my question was, what would make it feel better? What would unschooling, what would homeschooling, unschooling, what would make it feel better for you? And he straight up said, worksheets. And he even, like, as it came out of his mouth, he even said to me, and I know that's a waste of my time, but it feels like I'm doing something. And that was such an eye-opening moment for me to remember how important it is to have these conversations with families, because starting out as unschoolers, where that's all you have ever known, it's all your child has ever known, is a world of a starting line different than a child who has been conditioned in this experience and then suddenly has to make a change. And very often it leads to the child just saying, I don't like this. I don't like the freedom. It doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. And if we as parents have not been aware of that trauma, if we have not been aware of the journey that the child has to go on, it can be we can take it personally a lot of times. Well, fine, I tried. If you fine, go back to school, right? A lot of parents feel that way. A lot of parents will feel like they've failed. And it's important that we have these conversations. So that's the why, right? The why is this so hard? And you can apply this to anything. If everyone had their dream ideal lives, we all have, and I know very few people are living a perfect ideal life according to them, right? It's human nature to want to strive to something better. And it's hard to get to new levels, right? Like if you want to change your body, you want to like eat healthier and look nicer and fit into different clothes and feel stronger and be more flexible. It's not as easy as just doing that thing. You don't just get to have it. It's hard to change the way that you eat. It's hard to change your daily habits where you have to fit in a run or go to the gym or stretch or go to a yoga class. It's hard to make changes. And that's true in all of humanity. And changing the way that you learn, changing your family dynamic to switch to unschooling, it's exactly the same way. So the awareness here is like the first step, right? Understanding that, okay, this isn't just a like, you're free now, yay, you're going to learn everything you want. That's, first of all, super rare, okay? The child, and I do this with thousands of families, the child that steps out of the public school factory and is like immediately, yay, I'm going to do this thing. And they step right into it with like full passion is so rare. If you have a kid like that, you are a lucky, lucky parent because that experience, especially if they're older, like the longer they've been in the system, the harder this is. So to have a child that just steps right out and fully embraces unschooling and maintains that, so rare. Okay. So being aware of this is our first step. And the answer to this is deschooling. And I know you've heard this word. It's a buzzword that's been around for a really long time. It's extremely important. However, I think that there's a problem with people seeing deschooling as like this step between the before and the after. It's like this pause button period where you went through whatever system you were in, whether that was, homeschooling with a super rigid curriculum and structure or public school, private school, whatever. And then you like push the pause button and you have zero structure, zero expectations, zero pressure, zero everything for like this undetermined period of time. And then you can press play again. And then it goes back to some kind of like normal existence of structured learning or unstructured learning. And that's an extremely unrealistic view of what deschooling is. Unschooling and deschooling are actually the same thing. Like deschooling is a part of unschooling. And unschooling, although it has this weird connotation of like, well, we just don't school. That's what unschooling is. We're not schooling. It's a weird term, and to be honest with you, I wish that we could find another way to describe, like, what unschooling really is. I think it would help a lot to dispel the myths that come up around it, but it is what it is. Like, it's the term that people are familiar with, so it's a term we have to use to, like, grab attention of people, but really, it's just being against the systemic form of learning. That's what unschooling is. It's not that we're gatekeeping information. It's not that we're refusing to teach our children things. It is just being against the schooled mindset that everyone learns the same way, that everyone learns on the same path, that all learners are the same. It's anti-factory model of education, right? So deschooling is really just like a product of what's happening when you choose an unschooled lifestyle. Because unschooling is not this predetermined course of learning. It's not, we're all going to do the same thing. It's not, everything happens on the same timeline, or we're going to use all of these rigid curriculums. It's a uniquely individual course or like a uniquely individual way of learning. And ultimately, unschooling is just the belief that all of life is learning, which coincidentally is the Bridge Academy motto. All life is learning. And healing is a part of life. Healing trauma is a part of life. Healing and deschooling and deconditioning and looking at the world through a different lens, all of that is life, and it's real learning. And that's why one of the things that we say at Bridge Academy for new families, especially families with older children who are making this transition, we are not at Bridge going to expect you to step into our school and suddenly, virtually, and suddenly just meet all of these academic check marks. If you have to spend that pause period, that interim period, or that, period for a while, the transition, it's not a pause, it's a change. It's like, I'm really bad at analogies. I don't know. It's like changing the speed of your, slowing your speed down on your turntable or whatever. Um, it's just embracing a different path. And we don't expect you to start performing in the same way that your child had to do in school and that you now have to do as their parent. That adds a whole other layer of stress when now you have to perform as a teacher. That's not what this is about. It's about changing the way you view learning as a whole, changing the way you view your child's trajectory in life, changing the way you view how you fit into this world, how your children fit into the world. It's a whole different philosophy and outlook on life when you decide that you want to unschool your kids, when you're stepping out of the system. It's like a gateway into all of these other systems that you suddenly are going to see for what they are. And so at Bridge Academy and in the work that I do, we talk about that transition. What is it going to look like, feel like, take to step onto a different path, right? It's going to look different for everybody. Some people are going to have to walk through all these weeds or swim through this muck to get to the other side. And that's okay, but be willing to do it. And we're going to be willing to support you. So let's talk about what this transition looks like. So that's all the why. And hopefully a lot of that resonates with you, but let's talk about how. So how do I do this? And that's the hard part, right? Because it's really easy to say, oh yeah, all of this resonates. My child's totally conditioned by the system. Maybe the stories I've told you super resonate with you. But what do you do about it? And that's the part we have to really talk about. So there's a couple of steps. First is the awareness of the fact that you are doing this work also. Okay. This isn't just your child is on this deschooling journey, so are you. You are as conditioned as your child is, probably more. You just have a little more awareness, like we talked about. So you're going to be journeying through this deconditioning together. And that's hard. It's like if you were in a car accident and your body was healing, that's hard enough. But if your child was also, that's really tragic. I shouldn't talk about it that way. Let's use this like a stomach flu analogy. Rewind. If you have the stomach flu, that's hard enough. If your child and you have the stomach flu at the same time, that's DEFCON levels, right? It's the worst when mom and kid are sick at the same time. And that's what deschooling is. It's having the stomach flu together, not individually where you can keep up with the laundry and the sickness. You're both sick together. And that's hard and it sucks. And it's really you just wait for the days to be over. But you have to keep being the mom, even when you're sick. That's deschooling. Your child is going to be processing all of these things, and you also are going to be processing all of these things, and you have to do it together. And it's hard. But that's what we're going to do because it's worth it to get to the other side for you and for your child. So let's talk about these steps, okay? Number one, and probably the most important, is to recognize that trauma exists. You have to recognize that. And so many people are going to say, well, I don't have any school trauma. I was fine in school, or I got through it, or whatever. Forced compliance and performance always create trauma. End of story, period. You might not recognize that it's there. You might have learned to cope, but forced compliance and performance always create trauma of some kind. And it's going to be different for lots of people. But we have to recognize that. And that takes time to undo. You're going to need that deconditioning period when those structures have been maintained for so long. It's like the kid that I worked with recently who's just straight up said, I need the worksheets. Like, I need to produce something. That is conditioning. That is trauma. And we have to recognize that that exists because the freedom is terrifying. This is going to be more true the longer a child was in the system, because children are kind of, well, I don't want to get too philosophical here. Children are born with self-determination, okay? We are born curious and creative and with open minds and with an ability to just absorb so many things. And when we are placed into that factory model of education, that self-determination is chipped away little by little. And the longer we're in there, the more it's chipped away. And if you've ever seen me speak on any other podcast where I had to do like an intro to how I got to where I'm going, I've told the story about how when I was a public school teacher, my first job was as a kindergarten teacher, and I got to see a lot of that self-determination, self-actualization, right? They were curious. They believed in magic. They wanted to learn everything. And then I got transitioned from kindergarten to fifth grade. And I literally, the first day of school, that was like my first aha moment that we were doing something really wrong in here because the light was gone in their eyes completely. They didn't want to read. They didn't want to write. They didn't want to be there. And what a gut punch when a year before everyone was excited, right? Now that was minus the like crying and not wanting to be away from their parents. But when it came to the learning parts, right? So if children have been in the system for a while and that has been chipped away, it is really hard to find that again. And it's really hard to trust the adults around you. I had a call yesterday with a family who's, getting ready to decide if Bridge Academy works for them. And they are also working with another program. Their child had very significant trauma from school. And they're working, with another program in addition to Bridge, where the child's meeting like online with teachers. And fortunately, it's a great program that is very like unschooling friendly and understanding of, self-determined learning. But the parents were curious about why the child wasn't really engaging very much, even though it was this like very open-ended, very flexible, like there was no performance expected. It really was just like, get online and play video games with us, like to get to know the kids. And he was still very resistant to engaging, even in things that he loved. And I was like, well, you have to understand, he's waiting for the rug to be ripped out from under him, right? Like it's really hard to trust that. It's like when you've been a hostage and then suddenly you're free, but to another group of people, like, can you trust them? Or are they just trying to earn your trust? And then they're going to dump all of the schoolwork in front of you again. It's really hard to regain that. Like, this is trauma. And all of that is very hard to undo. Your child is going to be very skeptical at first. Like, are you really just going to let me sleep in until I'm not tired? Are you really okay with me playing video games in the middle of the day? Are you really okay with me like choosing what I want to learn? This doesn't feel real. I don't trust this. So we see things like They're overdoing it on those things, right? Well, if you're really going to let me, I doubt this is going to last very long. So I'm going to play video games as much as I possibly can because I guarantee any moment mom's going to change her mind about this, right? So they're like, it's like the kid who has the candy stash in front of them, like, oh, gotta get all the candy before they realize that I'm eating all the candy and take it away from me because they haven't had that freedom before. And then there's like the opposite of that, which is, well, I just won't do anything because I don't know what to do. Like every kid is going to like engage with this trauma differently, right? And maybe you've seen a perfect example of one or both of those things in your home. Like it's really hard to put those pieces back together. And in a lot of cases, they never go back together. And I know that's a really like tragic thing to say, but statistically, the older kids are in a system like that, the harder, like it's really hard to put those pieces back together. And sometimes it's impossible. And we have to, I'm not saying it's impossible for kids to become self-directed learners, but every child is going to be harmed differently by that experience. And I have seen instances where, kids were in school for up to ninth and 10th grade. And within a few months, they were easily able to like transition to a nice unschooling rhythm. And I've seen instances where a child at 5 years old was put in kindergarten and only a week in school took years to undo the trauma of. So, every situation is going to be unique. Every child is going to be unique, but we have to start by recognizing that trauma exists and start paying attention to what those triggers are, where it's showing up. Anytime you see resistance to anything that looks like school, even an invitation sometimes can feel triggering to a child. Like, oh, do you want to bake some cookies with me? That even something simple like that can feel scary. Like, oh, is she going to like make me talk about fractions? No, thanks. Like we have to be aware that trauma exists and see it as any other wound. You wouldn't let your child have like a festering open wound on their body and just ignore it. You would treat it. Trauma internally is a wound. It's a festering wound, and we have to treat it the same as we would with anything more physical. It just looks differently. And a lot of times it looks like patience. It looks like understanding. It looks like time. It looks like conversation. It looks like, love. It looks a lot of ways, which leads me to number 2. So recognition of that trauma. Number 2 is embracing a slow transition period. It's really hard when, as the parent, you have made this, you've come to this awareness that school is creating a trauma for your child. And you want to just walk away. You want to walk out the factory doors and pretend that it never existed. But part of recognizing that trauma is understanding that you might have to take some things slowly. You might have to keep some structures in place in order to transition peacefully. So you can ask yourself, how can I slowly shift my child's brain and nervous system to a place where they are not reliant on compliance, where they're not reliant on performance, because that is what has like triggered those dopamine receptors for them, right? Getting an A triggered a dopamine response in school. That felt good. They chased that. And even if they never got there, right? That was what was supposed to feel good. That's what they were conditioned to feel good about. And of course, when we recognize the harm in that, we want to take it away. We don't want them to feel that way anymore. But if that's all they've known, you can't just suddenly say, well, the freedom is the good part. Not having to do that is what should feel good. They can't help that that's how they were conditioned. And so we can ask ourselves, what can we slowly do to transition them away from that feeling while keeping some of those structures that make them feel safe, in place. And I don't want to just keep using like hostage analogies for public school, but it is a form of Stockholm syndrome, right? So like, someone who was in a situation where they were starving, where they were starved, you don't just suddenly give them access to a buffet. They'd make themselves sick. And so, we're going to gently introduce like slow things, so, to keep that structure while they recover from the trauma. And so, one example of this might be using a more structured system that they are used to, or using elements of that. So, worksheets might be something that feels safe to your child. It's familiar, it's something they are used to doing. It eats up some of that time that they're used to having taken away from them during the day or structured for them. So that's an example. You could use a worksheet, but take away the performance of it, right? Like, how can we use the structure that they're used to while removing the harmful parts of it so they can slowly transition away? So, and two examples of that might be, one might be using worksheets that they are used to using, but not worrying about grading them. We're not assigning grades. It's not about the performance. Like, we can keep the structure and even a little of the compliance, but let's immediately remove the performance piece of it. So give them some worksheets, but go over it together, and then that's it. The grade is irrelevant. Understanding the concept is what matters. Another thing you could try is assign reading, but no reports. You don't have to talk about it. Just, I want you to be reading every day. Pick a book for them, even, right? Take the choice away. You have to read Jurassic Park, 20 pages a day, whatever. But you don't have to answer questions. You don't have to fill out a book report. You don't have to do all that. There's no performance, just the structure. So those slow transitions where you're taking away, one of those elements that is harmful, like the performance part, which is the most harmful part, taking away that piece, and then but keeping a little bit of that structure or those familiar resources while they are making the transition away. Because eventually, if the performance part is gone, as they go on, like, really what you're doing is you're filling their time, you're making them feel like it's a safe transition away, rather than just like jolting them out of the system into what is going to feel like nothing at first. So using those structures to gently transition to a place where they feel safe discovering what their passions are, which is step number 3, which is stepping into their passions. But you're going to have to do that slowly, because I can almost guarantee that if you ask a child who is freshly pulled from the school system, what do you want to learn about? 90% of them are going to say, I don't know. And that is a genuine answer, because for a really long time, their whole lives, it didn't matter. What they wanted to do was completely irrelevant. They were told what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what to learn, how to learn it, when to learn it. Their home life was circled around the public school mentality or the curriculum mentality, right? They've never had the luxury of, what do you want to do? So they truly don't know. In a lot of cases, they have no passions anymore, because passions have been relegated to whatever time you have left at the end of the day or on a weekend. And that's not enough time to really commit to a passion. And also, we have destroyed the love of learning something new. And so, if a passion or something interesting is going to involve learning, and they have a traumatic response to the act of learning, why would they want to tell you if you're going to make it feel like school, right? That's that traumatic response. So we want to start slowly adding in and helping them find those things that they are passionate about, or slowly feeling like it's okay to try new things. And there's a few ways that we can do that. And number one is just being okay that it's going to be messy and telling them, we're going to let's try new things. If you don't like it, okay. Like there's never a better time in your life to try something and choose not to keep doing it than childhood, right? Or teenagerhood. Try something new. If you don't like it, great. Now you know that's good. Now you know that's not a thing I care about learning anything more about. I don't need to come back as an adult and wish that I'd tried to learn how to weld because I tried it when I was a teenager and it was way hot. I hated it. I don't need to do that ever again. If a career isn't going to involve that, not interested. If a project is going to involve that, I'm going to outsource it. And you're not giving, like, you don't have any other responsibilities as a child. So that's part of that freedom, and using that freedom for a good thing. Try lots of things. Let them try things and decide they don't like it. It's okay. You try this new thing. If you don't like it, fine. No big deal. Okay. The other important part here is that you have to model this, and this is part of your healing. You need to show your child that learning something new and trying something new doesn't stop when you turn 18 and have to get a real job. Okay? We are going to keep trying new things. So, what can you try that is new, that is something you've always been curious about? What can you learn more about in a way that is just purely passion driven, that you can show your child you're doing that? Maybe you could do it together, and maybe it's just a thing that you're doing. Maybe it's a passion you're rediscovering, and they're going to see you doing that. And that, like, subconsciously is going to do wonders for their healing and wonders for yours. The other thing that you can do here is be very aware of, because this part's kind of hard. Like, we have to kind of break out of how do we, like, how do I find those things? Like, my kid's interested in something super random. Like, what do I don't know. What do I do about that? Right. So, sorry, something weird is popping up on my computer here. There we go. There's a couple things there. Number one is you can invite their friends to do it too, right? Even if they're not in school, you could do some things like homeschool stuff doesn't only have to happen during school hours. So if they have friends from school, and this is really nice, if part of the reason that the switch to unschooling is hard is like missing the friend aspect, invite their friends to do it too. Oh, you want to try out, like, pickleball? We'll take some lessons, or we'll go to the court, whatever. Bring your friend from school. We'll do it after school's over. We'll do it on the weekends. Maybe it'll spark a passion. It'll keep that relationship going. Invite their friends to do things with them. That's really helpful. The other thing is utilize people in your community. Like, we live in such an amazing time right now where we have access to experts in everything, everything out there that you could possibly be curious about. There's an expert probably near you somewhere. And people that are passionate about what they do always want to share it. I have never once encountered an experience where I reached out to an expert in something and asked them to show my child something or other groups of people about their passion because the kid was passionate about it, and then been like, "Ew, no, I don't want to do that." They're usually like, "Yeah, I would love to do that," especially if you can pay them for their time. They want to share what they're passionate about doing. And I'll give you some examples. So this year, my oldest he's always been an animal lover. And nature. He loves being out in nature. And he had asked, and I've talked about this before, he and his friend that he's homeschooling with have asked for some more school-like structure in their days, which a lot of that is my son helping his friend make that transition, because my son's always been unschooled. And another part of that was my son feeling a little bit like he just wanted to ensure that he was still learning the same things that his peers in school were learning. That made him feel secure. So fine. Okay. You can use curriculum and be an unschooler. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. We're not purists over here. So as I was putting these pieces together for them, I wanted to include those passions. that his friend especially it's a challenge to find them, right? Because this is new for him. His friend was interested in something, so I've reached out to people that I know that do that. I've posted in our local Facebook community, and I've found people to do that. My son has wanted to get scuba certified, but the only program in our community that does scuba certification is like adults only, or only at certain like hours on the weekend. But I emailed the owner of the program and said, "Hey, I've got a teenager that really wants to get scuba certified. What are your options?" He was super excited about that. Yeah, if he can meet during school hours because he's homeschooled, great. We'll do a one-on-one. Give me a call, bring him in. We'll get him scuba certified, and he can be a one-on-one program. No problems. We've done that in the past with every topic you can imagine. My kids have, because they were always unschooled, they have these passions that pop up or these curiosities. And I almost always outsource it. I'm not an expert on everything, and you don't have to be as an unschooling parent. That's not the point. Why would I try to learn all these things to teach my kid when there's people that know them really well and love them? I outsource all the time. And so the one I'm really excited about this year is, like I mentioned, my oldest and his friend are super outdoorsy. So as I was like looking for, resources or curriculum, anything that was high school level, they have known for years. There was not even like an honors level biology, whatever, that they couldn't immediately pass the final exam on. And so there was no challenge there. And so I knew what they were interested in was learning more about like ecology, like the local nature, local ecosystems. So I asked around. My husband has an acquaintance that works for our local like Parks and Rec for the state, has like an ecology major in college. Like that's what he does. He came to our house and planted some native plants as a trade for like bike mechanic work that my husband did for him. He's super passionate about exactly what my kids are interested in learning. And when I reached out and asked, would you be willing to meet with them like once a week to teach them things, like just as a mentor, take them out into nature and teach them what you know? He was really excited about doing it. They had their first meeting last week. And, my son and his friend are very like typical teenage boys. They don't emote much, like, "Oh, cool. Thanks, man, bro." They got in the car after I picked them up from being out with this guy for 2 hours. They were like, "Oh, thanks, man. See you later." No emotion. As the van door was closing, like right before it closed, both of them were like, "That was so cool. We learned so many things. I didn't know any of that." And like all week long, they've been just like fact dumping at me about all the cool things they learned about or the one local area that he took them. What an amazing experience for everyone involved. I'm happy because I don't know any of that stuff and wouldn't know how to go about teaching it effectively. This guy, like being a mentor, was exactly what he wanted to do. Now he gets to fulfill that role. The kids are learning things that they really wanted. And all I had to do was ask. So utilize your community. Somebody knows what your kids are interested in. Ask them and be brave enough to reach out. And this is the future of education, but it's also the past. This is how humans have always learned, from one another, from mentors, from experts. Let's re-embrace that. Okay, and then the final step, I know we've been talking for a while, but the final step is routine. Routine. Consistency is actually what children are craving. Kids who have always been unschooled still thrive on consistency. Kids who have been in a system are really going to thrive on consistency. And that doesn't have to look like structured learning or textbooks or curriculum, but it does have to look like predictability. All right. Yes, I get to sleep in as long as I want, but I know that when I wake up, this thing is going to happen. Okay. I know that after I eat lunch, this thing is going to happen. I know that in the predictability and the consistency of a routine with that flexibility built in, that is going to change the game. Once you've taken away the structure of school, you want to replace it with some kind of routine and consistency. And I'm not going to dive into that here because I have already taught an incredible transformational workshop on that. If you are a Bridge Academy family, you get that for free. It is inside the parent portal. You can go look at it. It's a 3-part series that we recorded live. There's a workbook accompanying it. It's like the culmination of everything I've learned about this routines and unschooling and transitions and all that condensed into this like 3-hour-ish long experience with the accompanying workbook to help you. So if you're a Bridge Academy family, that's free. It's in the parent learning workshop or parent learning section of your portal. It's called the Aligned Homeschool Routines Workshop. If you're not a Bridge family, you probably should be, so come join, but it's okay if you're not. You can buy the workshop by itself. It's $47, and I'll put a link everywhere. But that will answer all of those questions. So to recap, when you are stepping into unschooling from any former situation, whether you're choosing it from the very beginning with a young child, there's still stuff that you have to like decondition your own mind around. If you're bringing a child from a different experience, whether that is public school, private school, very rigid, structured homeschool experience, and you want to start transitioning away from that into a more flexible, child-led type of learning, there's steps we have to think about, right? We have to understand that why. Why is this conditioning here? Why is this so hard? And then what are those steps of the how-to? And again, to recap, watch this again if you need to, okay? Number 1, recognize that trauma exists and start to pay attention to those triggers and those situations that bring that up. Number 2 is slow transitions. What can we keep? What resources, what structures can we maintain for a period of time while removing some of the compliance, removing some of the performance, so that our child can make that transition that doesn't feel so harsh for them. Number 3, how are we slowly helping them step into and discover what their passions are, modeling that, reaching out to the community, inviting friends along, trying things and being okay with not, going any further. And then 4 is routine, which the Aligned Homeschool Workshop will help you do. Okay, it is now time for our Bridge Academy questions that have come in. Quick little plug again, if you are not familiar, Bridge Academy is the private K-12 school that I founded, I guess we're in our 5th year, so 5-ish years ago, for families that homeschool and unschool all around the world. We have around 2,000 students worldwide, all 50 states, every Canadian province, and like 25 other countries. We're constantly growing. We are adding new families literally every day. We have open enrollment. You can switch anytime. We help you with the transition period, whether you are homeschooling and just want to switch over to getting those documents covered for you, whether you are in public school and need help withdrawing and making that transition. Wherever you are, we handle all of the documentation and paperwork for you. We create records for your child, official records, transcripts. They can graduate with a high school diploma. Literally before I came here, I mailed off official transcripts to several colleges for some of our seniors and graduates that have done amazing things in the world. I'm going to start crying if I talk about it, so I won't. But you get access to the full Your Natural Learner curriculum that I created. We're adding more resources every day. You get to ask questions like this, be a part of our Facebook group. It's a really fantastic place to be for support for you, for your child, to get that bridge of the support and the documentation that's needed in the school world that we still exist in, but the privilege and flexibility and opportunity to fully follow your child's needs, interests, desires without compliance and performance, which, we don't like that. We want autonomy for our kids. So that's Bridge Academy. You can learn more at bridgeacademy.us. Click any link anywhere in any of my bios, wherever you follow me, reach out. I'll answer your questions. My team will answer your questions. We'll help you out. And it's very affordable and equitable. $3.99 per child per year. That's it. That's the only fee. You get curriculum, you get everything. And there's payment plans. So not out here to price gouge. We're here to support. Okay, let's do questions. So I'll answer the question that came in the chat real quick. So maybe you're going to cover this, but what do you do with a kid who is the opposite of what you're discussing right now? A kid who wants absolutely zero structure or anything school-like. So I did kind of, I don't know at what point you hopped on to the call. Maybe you've been here the whole time. I sort of talked about that at the beginning, but that is a kid who is deep in the trauma, right? Like there's some, if there is a resistance to anything that feels or looks like school, we're deep in the trauma category, right? And that's whether the child is neurodiverse or not. Often a neurodiversity will amplify that trauma, like a child with PDA or anything like that will amplify the traumatic experiences. So in that case, if the triggers are structure of any kind, I would jump straight to the routine part. You still can have a routine. Like structure and routine, like they're not the same thing. So that's where I would go. I would go straight to that workshop because that will help you no matter what. Because the consistency is still like you can be consistent in your day and still involve nothing that resembles school. So you're really going to kind of look at the like steps 1 and 2 or 1 and 4, recognizing the trauma, treating that as a wound, right? And then also just settling into a routine. Those are the things we're going to work on right now. If that slow transition still looks like a reliance on a structure that your child is being very resistant to, let it go. Don't even, then what you need to do, your transition needs to start at 0, like no expectations, and that's fine too. But routine will be the answer for you. Okay. So these are the questions that came in from my Bridge Academy families. And again, I read these anonymously, no names are given. So you'll have to listen for your question. Okay, is it okay if we jump around a lot? My style of homeschooling is very loose and taking bits and pieces of different things. One week we might be doing a marine course, the next learning about dinosaurs. I know unschooling is about following interests, but is it okay to move around so much, and how will that reflect on our transcripts? Yeah, of course that's okay. Like that's real learning, really, right? It's just like following the interests of the kids. Sometimes they're going to get everything that they need, want, and desire in a week of learning. And sometimes you will spend months doing the same thing. And I always talk about how my oldest went through an ancient Egyptian phase where literally from the ages of like 6 to 9, that was it. If it was not around ancient Egypt, he was not into it. And that was definitely a time I relied on my community. We lived in a town with a big university, and I was like reaching out to professors, like, please help me. I don't know anything else about ancient Egypt. I can't sate his knowledge. Give me something, meet with me, show me something. Which a little story I do have to tell that's heartwarming. This summer we went and spent a few weeks in New York City, and we went to the Met Museum, which my son had never been to, and I hired a tour guide to walk us through because it's so big there. I wanted them to like focus on some things. And when she asked, which Liza Banks, by the way, is who I worked with, find her on like TikTok. She's fantastic. She teaches so many things just online. You have to go follow her. I forget. If you just search Liza Banks, you'll find her. Anyway, I hired her to take us through the Met, and she asked, is there anything specific you want to see? And I told her that my oldest has had a passion in the past for ancient Egypt, but he's a little embarrassed about it now as a teenager. So I would love to spend time there, but expect that he's going to act, because we had his friend went with us to New York City, expect that he's going to act like it's not cool. And so she was really understanding of that. Walked us through ancient Egypt, was like, and you could see like as we were walking through the exhibits, like he knew most of what she was already saying, but there were bits and pieces that were like new information. And so there's like this tug of war in him of like, be cool. This isn't cool. Learning isn't cool. But then like we turned the corner and he saw the little, I don't know if you know much about ancient Egypt, but he saw the little blue William the hippo, which he still has, a stuffed animal, William the hippo. I hope his friends aren't watching this. Don't tell him. He still has one of those hiding in his closet. But when we turned the corner and he saw that, there was no cool filter left. It was like, I was so excited, and it really like was just such a great experience. So those passions all came back to the surface, even though it's been many years since that passion was there. But to answer your question, yes, totally, totally fine that you're bouncing around. Share those in the learning logs. It's okay to bounce around. Like that's literally our job. It's the Bridge Academy team's job to synthesize the things that you are doing into a complete transcript. So we will do the work of making that official. You do the work of diving into your kids' passions. And that's what we do. We'll be a team together. What is the best way to support a child who has a speech impediment with reading? So I think I might email this person individually to ask more about this. I want I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, because I'm not sure if you're asking if like the impediment is only showing up when they're reading, or if you're asking me the child who already has a speech impediment, how do you help them with reading? I think that's the way you're asking it. In that case, whole language context is going to be a lot more helpful for that child than the phonics driven, which is usually what I promote anyway, which is whole language. But if your child has a speech impediment, breaking words down, breaking it down to letters and like phonics sounds is going to be challenging and will change the way they read, which makes it very hard. So focus on a whole language approach to reading, and in context is going to be better. But I will reach out. If that was your question, I'll reach out individually. I write that one down to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. Okay, next question. We are relatively new to unschooling. We just started in January. My kids were in grades 1 and 3. We spent up until very recently deschooling, traveling, having fun, and doing lots of experiential learning. So you were already unschooling. We've done very little book reading. My kids didn't want to. I feel like I've answered the question and now I'm reading it. We've done no book work in an effort to forget the school way, which was traumatizing for my child. They read signs and review pamphlets when we're out and about. I put captions on when we watch TV shows and encourage them to read along and just look for casual ways to practice. That sounds great. I recently noticed that they have both regressed a bit with their reading and writing, and I panicked a bit. So I decided to get hooked on phonics for my 7-year-old and some curriculum workbooks for both of them. This is like I need to use this as a case study because this is so typical of do you see? I'm so glad I taught this first, and now I'm reading this question because it's like you're seeing in real time what happens. Like the fear that like seeing deschooling as just this like pause button, and now we're trying to like go back to normal instead of transitioning to what is true for your children. There's no such thing as behind, right? They didn't regress. They're just falling back to a place where they don't feel like they're performing for somebody, like they have to be at this level. Now they feel safe just being at the level that they exist in, which is where you can meet them now. Because expectations of the reading levels of a first and a third grader in our current system are astronomically unrealistic and not developmentally appropriate at all. But then also you're seeing like the fears here, right? Like I saw this and I got scared. And so instead of like asking myself, why do I feel these fears? What is really happening? I'm just like reacting and buying a phonics curriculum and curriculum workbooks. And it's like, my 7-year-old is enjoying it, but my 9-year-old hates it. That's because your older one probably has more school trauma and says it just feels like school and she hates school. The last thing I want to do is replicate school and put pressure on her and contribute to her feeling like she doesn't like to learn, but I want them to both have those strong foundations in reading and writing. So in your first part of this question, you already outlined that you are creating these strong foundations for them. You're doing that by reading real things when you're out in public. If they're reading pamphlets and signs and menus and GPS directions and exhibits in the museum, that is real reading. That is more real than a textbook or a phonics curriculum, right? Because they're using it in context. And there's so much data that shows the disconnect between curriculum and real life. Like when we are forcing them to read something, especially when it's a lot of these like early level spelling curriculums, phonics curriculums, the way things are utilized and written are so far removed from what kids are going to see in real life. Like it's kind of the example of if you've ever seen a kid, or maybe this was you in school, where you took a spelling test and you got 100%, but then like the next day you needed to write one of those words in a paragraph and you didn't know how to spell it because it was memorized completely out of context. You didn't actually have the context of using that word. So you are already developing a strong foundation by using literacy skills in real life. Captions on TV, reading things out in public, writing to-do lists, write letters to family. That is a strong foundation. Forcing school-like things, especially when there's trauma around it, that is doing the opposite. I'm wondering if anyone has been on this journey and is a few steps ahead. Do I continue deschooling and not push? They're learning through experience, but I fear they will regress and never develop their language skills if we don't practice. Maybe I just need reassurance. And this is the kicker to this question. By the way, I've not read this question before. Edit. Since posting this question, my younger child has become resistant to doing the work too. I think the novelty wore off as well as following his sister's lead. So if this was your question, go back and rewatch this entire video that I just did because we're going to talk about all of this. In addition, I want you to watch the literacy workshop, which is also a resource that's free for Bridge families. It's inside Bridge Academy portal. I don't think that one's available for sale outside of the portal. So you have to be a Bridge Academy family to get it. Watch that. That will help you so much. One of my master's degrees is as a reading specialist and in like the understanding and development of reading and psychology of reading. So I know what I'm talking about with literacy. So I have a whole workshop on that. There's a writing workshop and a literacy workshop, and it's going to talk about how literacy develops, how writing develops, how reading develops, the role of language in literacy, and also my train of thought just derailed. Oh, how to do this in a way that builds those foundations that you're looking for without relying on a curriculum like that. So fantastic question. Thank you so much. That was like the perfect I wish I didn't have more questions because that one like sums up everything I just talked about so well, but we'll keep going. Okay. I need to write this down though. Okay. How do I figure out how to coordinate one-on-one time when we aren't following any specific routine? You guys, these questions are perfect. Very much going with the flow and having different outing opportunities on different days. We spend a lot of time together, but it's not deep connection time with each kid. So routines. You need to go to the routines workshop. If you have not done that already, that's where you need to go. If you have done it already, you need to do it again. And you need to reevaluate those priorities. That workbook is going to walk you through this. So this is really a great example. I think it's day 2 of the workshop where you outline some of these like individual priorities. And this is really where you need to have those connections. So you're asking, you're saying we spend a lot of time together, but it's not deep connection time. So that you saying that means that you are feeling that way. You are feeling like you don't have a deep connection and one-on-one time with each of your kids. And then so that's going to be one of your priorities, but that doesn't make it a family priority. And this sounds like mean, but listen to me for a minute. You're feeling that you're lacking this deep connection with one-on-one time. So one-on-one time with each child is one of your high priorities, you personally. When we are looking at setting up an aligned routine, we have to look at each individual person, their needs and their priorities, and then the priorities and needs of the family unit as a whole. You are saying in this question that deep connection with each child, that time with each child is a high priority for you as an individual in your family. Then what we also need to do is we need to assess, is that also true for each of my children? Are they showing me, and I don't know how old your kids are, so they might be old enough that you can just ask them, do you feel like we have enough one-on-one time? Do you want more one-on-one time? That's going to show you for that individual child, is that also a high priority, or is that like not, or a low priority for that child? If you have a partner or a co-parent or spouse, are they also have that discussion? Are they also feeling a lack of deep connection time? If the child is younger and can't really explain that, are they showing you signs through their behavior, through their actions, that they're craving that deep connection time? And then this is what that workbook does, right? It help you plot all of this out. It's like you're being a data scientist while you're creating these routines. So you're plotting like, okay, this is a deep connection time is a high priority for me. Maybe for this child, maybe not for this child, not for my partner, really, not for my spouse. So then we look at, like, as a whole family, are we seeing these things happen that show that that is a high priority? And then if it is, let's say one-on-one time is family high priority for everybody, like that is the thing we have to prioritize now. Then we also want to look at, okay, all of these like different outings that you're doing every day, are those high priority? Are those enjoyed across the board? Does that need to be done with every child? Are we seeing a correlation between when we have all of these like outside opportunities that we're saying yes to? Is there also a correlation of that high priority of we're lacking one-on-one time? What's happening there? If we remove some of those outings, if we say no to some of those things that like we aren't all feeling great about, does that priority of one-on-one time then lessen a little bit? And what are we seeing there? What decisions can we make for the little period of the future, right? And the great thing about this workshop is that it's not something you do one time and then you magically have a perfect routine that lasts forever and ever. Newsflash, your kids keep changing. So do you, so does the world. You have to keep going through this. So go back to that workshop, really pay attention, really use it, use the workbook, use the resources, because that is what that will answer your question for you. Okay, I would love to hear your approach on screen time. My kids would spend all of their time on a screen if I allowed it. I try to limit it to no more than 2 hours a day. Should I allow them more free range as part of the deschooling process? So here we have another deschooling question again. And the first thing I want you to do is, if you haven't already, rewatch this whole video, because deschooling and unschooling, we're doing these together, right? Deschooling is not this pause period in between where we're going to try to go back to some like different normal than before. Deschooling is part of what we're doing. So no, don't make a decision to do something for a predetermined period of time, because that's not realistic. That's not deschooling. That's not unschooling. That's not what we're doing anymore. We're making a decision that works right now. I'm going to actually put screen time down as a full other topic, because we're already over an hour here today and I don't want to just keep talking, and I could definitely talk for over an hour about screen time. 90% sure there's a resource on screen time inside the parent learning portal or in the portal for Bridge families. There definitely was. We might have removed it for whatever reason, but I'm going to double check that. There was an interview I did with Ash Brandon last year or the year before, who also just put out a book about screen time. I forget what it's called, but Ash Brandon is the author's name. So you could look that up, and we have there's an interview with them in the portal. If it's not in the portal, I'll make sure it goes to the portal. For some reason, it wasn't there for a while. I'll have to look into that. Anyway, I will do a screen time topic in one of the coming weeks. Here's the thing. If you're looking for an education expert, which I hope you consider me as, if you're looking for someone in my position to tell you screen time is bad, you're looking in the wrong place. And that's just my stance. Sorry, that's how it is. I don't limit screen time for my children. As a general rule of thumb, I'll put an asterisk because my kids are 14, 11, and 5. So my 14 and 11-year-old, no limits. My 5-year-old, we are in the process of helping him learn that self-regulation, because that's what it's all about, right? If your kids would spend all of their time on a screen, if you allowed it, try that. Would they really? Would they really spend all of their time on a screen if you let them forever? Probably not. Most kids would get bored with it, right? So try it, see what happens. Because right now, if there's limits, that's why they're choosing it. We used this analogy earlier, right? It's like if they think it's going to be ripped away from them at any time, of course they're going to keep doing it. So if you didn't have limits, would they really only play screens forever and ever and ever? Or would they maybe play screens all day for 2 weeks? And then when they really trust that you're not going to rip it away from them at any given point, the novelty wears off, like anything else, if there's other things that they can do. Now, of course, we want to talk about, setting healthy boundaries for ourselves. We're modeling that. We are not sitting around on a screen all day if we don't want our kids to sit around on a screen all day. So are we modeling that? Are we giving them opportunities to do other things? Are we going outside? Are we paying attention to things like, and having conversations with them? So for example, I notice when you play this certain game, you're not really kind to your brother or sister. Like maybe the energy of that game is making you kind of grumpy. What could we do about that? Could we maybe only play that game, for a little bit? Could we take a break from that game? Could we just be really aware that that game makes us feel that way? Collaboration, practice with self-regulation, but really just leaning into like, is this a fear that I have? So think about that a little bit. Look in the portal for that resource. I'll see if it's there, but I'll also make screen time a topic. How do you deal with perfectionism in a young child? This is the last question, by the way. Actually, no, there was one that was emailed because the form didn't work. 2 more questions. How do you deal with perfectionism in a young child? I have personally dealt with this. My 6-year-old has been very particular and exact over the last year or 2. For example, open-ended toys need to be set up like the picture on the package. Princesses in coloring books need to be colored exactly like they are in the movie. Lately, this has been very extreme to the point that she gets very upset and frustrated when something isn't perfect. She beats herself up and tells herself she isn't good enough. We've been trying to tell her nobody is perfect, her pictures are beautiful, etc., but I don't think she's hearing that. Maybe you have some tips on how to approach this and get her out of this mindset. Adding, she's never been to public schools, never gotten a grade or anything like that, so it's not school trauma. We also try our best to correct any mistakes she makes in a positive way and only when necessary. So this is just a personality thing, right? You have been blessed with a very type A perfectionist child. And I have one of those, and it is my oldest, and it is also why ancient Egypt was so long and draining for me. He was very much like this, to the point where I vividly remember when he was 3 years old, he wanted to learn how to write his own name, which is not a short name. It is 7 or 8 letters long, and it was very hard for him. And he was 3, and we were in our living room and he wanted to learn how to write it. And I had written it on a piece of paper and he was trying to write it. And he needed a new piece of paper for every mistake he would make. And we tried, like, let's use a dry erase board. Let's erase it. Let's fix it. No, it had to be perfect. And I just have this memory burned into my brain of him. Like, he would start to write his name, and as soon as he would make a mistake, he would crumple the paper up and throw it over his shoulder. It was like a cartoon, where they're making a mistake and it's just this pile of crumbled papers piling up behind him. That was literally it. And that has been a metaphor for him for everything in his life, is this perfectionism of, like, exactly what you're saying. It has to be perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, it was a character flaw. Like, he was dumb and bad, and like he would feel that. And I think in a way that comes from me. I'm very type A, but very perfectionist as well, but have learned to deal with it. Something that really helped him, and I have seen success with other families, is learning about, this might seem really random, but learning about abstract art was so healing for him. We talked about Picasso, Van Gogh, some of, like, just that abstract art period in time. I know Van Gogh and Picasso were not like exactly the same types of art, but he really connected with the Starry Night. I'm going to get teary. Anyway, seeing that picture and talking about how it's priceless art. It's still beautiful. You still see exactly what it is, but it doesn't look perfect. It doesn't look real, but it's abstract, right? It's abstract in nature. We started with Picasso because, of course, Picasso is so strange and obviously not perfect, but it's art and it's beautiful, and people pay a lot of money for it just to go look at it. And my son really resonated with Van Gogh. But we looked at art as a whole and talked about and really embraced the word abstract, that perfect wasn't part of that art process. And so he really embraced that, and he would say he would use that as like a comforting mechanism. Like if he was doing something and it wasn't perfect, he would say, it's okay, it's abstract. Like even if it was something like riding a bike or whatever, like something completely not art related, he would use that word to like calm himself down. It's okay, it's abstract. And as he's grown up and matured, of course, it's not as much of an issue. He's still very much a perfectionist, still tends to beat himself up if he's not, the best at something, but he's, it's a thing that people just deal with. But try that. Try looking at very famous art and using that terminology of abstract to see that perfection is objective. Okay. I did have one more question that came in. Actually, I better flip over here and make sure. Okay. All right. This is the last question. My son is 9.5 and absolutely hates handwriting. He has been unschooled all his life, but still managed to somehow end up with what looks like school-type trauma around this skill. He just started reading at 8.5, but writing is way behind that skill. He says he can't write because he can't spell and his letters are not perfect, so he doesn't even want to try. He says when things are not perfect, it's too stressful. Whoa, 2 perfectionist kiddos in a row. I only ask him to write his name on greeting cards, but nothing else really. He does write a tiny bit on his drawings or creations, like a car's name or an acronym, just a few letters here and there. What is the normal timeline for writing development, and when should I be worried? So, may also want to consider looking at abstract and perfectionism. So this is an interesting concept where kids who have never been in school and don't have like traditional school trauma or like school initiated education trauma still end up with the same reactions. And a lot of that is society based. So he may not have been in school, but 4th grade boys statistically have like the highest rates of animosity and bad feelings about writing than any other like group of people. Like 4th grade boys hate writing, period. So it could just be societal. He might see that represented in books, in movies, in TV shows, in conversations that he's picking up with friends, whether that's in person, online. Like it is a thing. It's something like the statistics, something like 92% of 4th grade boys hate writing or think they're bad at it. So certainly not, many of those kids are unschooled and always have been. So it's really just something that is likely there from environmental resources as well, or environmental stimuli as well. So first of all, there is a writing workshop inside the portal. If you have not already watched that, watch it. It's in the parent learning section. I'm so happy that like every question today, I've been able to say there's a resource. And if there's not, I'll make it for you. So those of you who are not Bridge Academy family members, like I'm doing what I can to give you the resources here. This is not just like a curriculum for your kids. We're helping you here too. We are supporting you also. But there's a writing workshop that definitely will be helpful here because it's going to show you that continuum of writing. So spoiler, writing does not develop on a timeline of like writing does not develop on a timeline, it develops on a continuum. So there are stages of writing development that every person will progress through, and they will progress through every level. You don't skip levels. So this continuum of writing, everyone goes through them. There's not a timeline of writing where like you should spend 6 months in this stage and 3 years in this stage. Like everyone will progress on this continuum in a different timeline, a unique individual timeline, but the continuum will always be the same. So a child might spend 6 months in one continuum and then like a month, and then like go through 4 of the stages in a year. Some kids might spend 3 years in one stage and then a year. Like the progression through the stages is what matters, not the timeline in which we progress on it. And also, spoiler alert, the continuum of writing does not have an end period. There is not a period in time where you are a perfect writer. And if you think that's true, pick your favorite author of all time, reach out to them, ask them, Do you feel like you are at your peak of writing ability? And they will tell you no. I consider myself a very good writer. I definitely can improve. And I am aware of that. So the continuum of writing never ends. So we really want to strip away the belief that there's these like benchmarks where they should be. We also really want to understand that writing is not putting a pencil to a piece of paper. That's not writing. That's the mechanics of writing. Writing is expression. It's expressing ourselves. And everyone's going to do that differently. I do write a lot. I do. All of my notes for this video, I wrote down by hand. That's my preferred form of expression. If I turned this into anyone, you would not be able to read anything that I wrote because it's my personal shorthand and it looks just like scribbled lines, but I know what it means. Many kids, the act of handwriting is what is stressful for them. And that can be developmental in so many different ways. If they were holding a pencil too early, if they were forced to hold a pencil too early, it sounds like that wasn't the case here. But it's also really slow. Writing by hand rarely keeps up the speed of what's going on in your brain. So something else to consider is, how are you helping them utilize resources that exist to express themselves? Most authors probably don't write by hand anymore, maybe like, storyboards or something. We're typing. So get him a keyboard. Get him, use like an app, a notes app where he can just record his voice and transcribe it. We don't want to focus so much on the mechanics of things like spelling and handwriting when we have resources that do that for us. This is a good way of embracing technology, right? It doesn't matter if you're a great speller. Who cares? There's spell check, truly. And I know if he's a big perfectionist, that's going to be hard. So utilize the resources that exist. It doesn't matter if he can write by hand really, really well. Practice it. Eventually he'll need to write by hand for some things, but right now, the most important thing is developing it sounds like healing the trauma around it, even if it wasn't placed there. Trauma is a weird thing, right? We want to feel good about what we're doing when we're when we're learning a skill, and writing is expression. So telling stories, making videos, like there's lots of ways to express ourselves. So you can take all of those skills of writing and find other ways for him to do it. He might just have trouble writing by hand. So watch the writing workshop that's in the portal. It's all in there. All right. Someone commented here. I'm going to read this because I think it's very helpful in response to the perfectionist question. I don't know if the question asker will see this, and I don't think this chat saved, so I will read this for you because I appreciate you saying this. I was that child. Nothing less than perfect was acceptable. My princesses had to be exactly the same also. I was later diagnosed with OCD. I'm not saying that's your kid, but I went to art school. I became an artist, and it helped immensely. But the perfectionist tendency is still a huge part of who I am, and I've learned how to embrace it and work with it rather than against it. I let it do its thing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. For spelling in English, is there a purpose of where, homophones? I know the difference, but is there a point for them being spelled differently? Do kids just learn how to say them all? I'm not entirely sure of the question. I mean, that kind of, and it's so, as someone who studies like literature and literacy, I find it so interesting to like zoom out and watch the conversations that happen. I am going to end this call soon, I promise. I find it very interesting seeing the reactions and responses to the changing of our literacy with newer generations, right? Like there's such resistance to kids shortening words, right? Like just writing a U in a text or LOL. Like there's so much resistance to a change in, like, my husband is a journalist and an English major by profession. And he gets so frustrated when he sees things that are just written in all lowercase letters, like a name of a company that has no capital letters in it. Like that stresses him out so much. And I just find it so interesting because like over time, there's always something that we're just mad about. Like It's so hard to embrace change, especially when you've like made it your passion to study something, but like we don't speak like the way we spoke in the Revolutionary War, right? Like we don't speak like they did in Shakespeare's time. Language changes, writing changes, things evolve to be easier, to be simpler, to like as cultures mesh, we change, the way that we speak, we change our language. And that's just human evolution, that's progression, that's change. And I think it's really cool to watch it happen. Um, and I think it's very cool also to watch reactions to it, to see how upset people get. Like I'm so even as a teacher and a literacy expert, I'm so unbothered by like poor spelling or like alternative spellings, even that, like people using the wrong form of their. I don't care. Like it so doesn't bother me because the message is still there, right? The expression is still there. I understand what they're saying. Um, and if they want to use those words in any kind of professional context, there will be an editor, a spell checker that can help them. Like we want to be rewarding the expression. Anyway. All right. That was a great hour and a half. Thanks, guys. Sorry that was a little longer than normal, but hopefully you got some good stuff out of it. We will put timestamps on the YouTube video for the questions that came in. Again, if you are a Bridge Academy family member, all of the things that I mentioned, you can get inside the parent portal, all of those resources for parent learning, the aligned homeschool routines workshop, literacy workshop, videos, all of that. Check those resources out. And you can always submit a question for next week. I don't know what the topic will be next week. I think I have it written down somewhere. We'll figure it out. I have a guest expert coming on pretty soon too, talk about math. Yay. Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye. And